way to know that we know and to let go and let Spirit flow is to establish a solid connection to the divine that's within us and all around us in our time of meditation. So I invite you now to relax and let go. Let go of whatever's on your mind and your heart this morning for just a few minutes. Release all your cares and concerns. Take a couple long, deep breaths. Inhale and hold. Exhale and relax. Bringing all your awareness to breath as once again you inhale. Hold that breath. And exhale and relax. And once more, inhale long and deep and hold that breath for a comfortable moment. And then exhale slowly and completely, surrendering yourself and all that you are to this safe and sacred moment. Bring your awareness to your heart. Move your mind from our outer world to your inner world. For that is where we connect with higher power. That is where we connect with that universal intelligence that created everything. That is where we connect with divine guidance and knowing. Once we sense we've made that connection, relax into it. Don't work it, simply allow it to be and be with it. This is unity. This is oneness. Bask in unity, in the silence. Tapping in to this unity, this oneness with higher wisdom is when we know that we know, for we are unerringly guided by divine wisdom. So for this moment of rest and refreshment and oneness, and for the sure guidance and knowing that is ours as we open to it, we are filled with gratitude. Thank you. Thank you, Spirit. Thank you, Mother, Father, God. Thank you, divine intelligence. And so it is. Nobody wanted to break the spell you had woven with that beautiful music. What a gift. Thank you. And good morning.
Good morning.
We are talking this morning about some of the 12 powers of man, wisdom and will, and we're talking about courting wisdom and will. And just to keep things exciting, we're also going to talk about understanding, which precedes wisdom and will. Now, if we lived 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, we would have courted wisdom and will by courting the goddesses of wisdom and will. If we lived in the Mediterranean region, we would have sought insight and help and answers from the goddess Sophia. You've all heard of Sophia? The goddess of wisdom. We're told historically that she represents sound judgment, intelligence, and practical wisdom. I can tell I'm going to need my water here. Interestingly, the core word of all of those qualities comes from the Latin sapere, which means to discern. Isn't that what we're looking for when we need to make a decision or choose a direction? We want discernment, we want intelligence, we want practical wisdom. When the Jewish people, the Hebrew people came along, and ultimately Christianity, they recognized Sophia not only as the goddess of wisdom or an aspect of God that represented wisdom, they recognize Sophia as true power. Sophia is known alternatively as the black goddess, simply meaning that this comes from deep within. It's not out in the world readily seen. She's referred to as the divine feminine. Christianity refers to her as the mother of God and the mother of all creation. She has a sacred shrine in Istanbul. Has anybody visited Hagia Sophia? Magnificent structure that is still considered to this day one of the 7 wonders of the world, not only for its splendor as a temple, but for its architectural achievements. Sophia is represented by the symbol of a dove, which represents spirit. She's also crowned by stars, which is a Middle Eastern icon indicating her absolute divinity. So if you wanted insight and help to make a difficult decision, you might want to consider, many years ago, honoring the goddess Sophia. But if you were over a few miles to the east in India, you would be honoring the goddess Saraswati. Saraswati is sort of akin to Sophia, recognized by the Hindu people as the goddess of wisdom. In fact, she's recognized as the goddess of knowledge, wisdom, and learning, and music and art. And Saraswati is one of the trinity in the Hindu pantheon of gods and goddesses that creates, maintains, regenerates, and supports the universe and everything in it. I'm fascinated that over millennia, mankind has recognized the importance of knowledge, of understanding, of discernment and wisdom, and realizing that they're intimately connected with will. Across the time and across continents, we perceive that these qualities are somehow integrally connected. In ancient times, if you wanted guidance from the gods and goddesses, you would go to the temple, you would pray, you would bring offerings of fruit and flowers, you might bring sacrifices of a harvest, of doves, of sheep, even occasionally human sacrifice was practiced, especially in the dedication of a child to temple service. If you were really looking for wisdom and insight and understanding, you might seek to partake of the food that had been dedicated at the temple. Because the belief was, here are all these foods that were brought as offerings, dedicated, let's say that the temple of Sophia, so dedicated to the goddess Sophia in wisdom. And if you ate that food, through eating that food, you would acquire the wisdom of the goddess. It's not that complicated these days, and we understand it much differently. You see, back in those days, the perception was that all power was out there, owned by gods and goddesses. And you had to entreat them and engage them and somehow get them to favor you with the gift of whatever power that they represented was. In unity, we recognize that each and every one of us, in our innate divinity, is already powerful. We don't have to go out there and beg for power and help. We have it here. Charles Fillmore, Unity co-founder's landmark book, The 12 Powers of Man, speaks to this. He wanted to wake us up to the fact that because each and every one of us was created by the Creator, we have within us power and capability and capacity. And he described it and broke it down into 12 categories, the 12 powers of man, that we, as spiritual seekers, are invited to develop and practice. Now here's the good news. Every single one of us has all 12 of those powers. You got it. It's there within you right now. Some of those powers may come more naturally to you. Others might take more development, but they're already there. And our call as spiritual seekers having a human journey is to recognize that innate power and develop it and practice it in a balanced way that supports not only us in our journey, but that brings good into the world around us. So when we have a decision to make, when there's something that's calling to us to do, there are 3 powers that we'd like to connect with and tap into. The first is the power of understanding, the power of knowledge. Knowledge or understanding is represented for us in unity by the disciple Thomas. And if you remember Thomas, he wouldn't believe what the other disciples told him. His edict was, show me. I need to see it for myself. He was the show me the money disciple, if you will. He wasn't going to take anything on faith. He said, prove it to me, then I'll believe it. That's a very human understanding, a very human perspective of the power of understanding. Understanding from a human perspective is the ability to know and comprehend based on what we see, think, and feel. In other words, understanding from a human perspective is based on our experience or what we see in the world around us. Human understanding is limited. Now, like Thomas, we need to know something about what's going on, and we need to have the mental ability, the intelligence to comprehend and understand its significance. But if we make decisions based solely on our human perspective, we are often drawn into challenges and issues. Spiritual understanding that we develop very specifically in our time of spiritual evolution and development. And when I say that, I'm talking about meeting here on Sunday morning, reading the spiritual materials, getting into the daily word, praying and meditating and doing these things a little bit every day, spiritual discipline. Spiritual understanding is the ability to know and comprehend the laws of thought, divine ideas, and spiritual truth. That goes above and beyond just seeing what's going on in the world and figuring out how to work with it. It overlays it with a higher thought, a higher perspective. Spiritual understanding is how we receive enlightenment and insight, and it shapes and informs our perceptions of whatever it is we need to be working on. Spiritual understanding becomes that sure knowing we sang about it this morning, that transcends just the intellectual perception and knowledge and comes from higher spiritual truth. But when we need to make a decision, when life presents a challenge, we need to do more than just understand what's going on. We need to exercise wisdom. We need to choose wisely. It's also alternatively known as the power of judgment and the power of discernment. Wisdom is discerning. It's discriminating. Ideally, it's good judgment. The disciple James represents for us the power to choose wisely based on what we understand. Human discernment, human wisdom, is the mental act of evaluating by comparing and contrasting, and it's based on our human sensory perceptions. We appraise, we evaluate, we discern, but we do it all from a worldly perspective, from a human perspective, and is sometimes fallible. And that's why we want to develop our spiritual side, because when we apply spiritual wisdom and discernment to anything we're challenged with, we do it by listening to the voice of intuition. And that voice of intuition will bring us to a greater realization of who we are as spiritual beings. And it will help us see the situation from a higher spiritual perspective. It's the ability to use spiritual understanding and to judge with righteous or right judgment. Interestingly, spiritual discernment, judgment, wisdom, Charles Fillmore tells us, is centered in the gut, in the solar plexus. Have you ever made a decision that you weighed all the options and the details here that suggested maybe you should take this path, but you have that gut feeling that says, no, you need to take that path? Have you ever experienced it? That's listening to your higher wisdom. Understanding and wisdom bring us to the power of will. In fact, they are the foundation of will. Will is the creative expression of Sophia and Sarasvati. I could never be a Hindu. I don't get those syllables all tangled up on my tongue and I can't say it. Will is when we make a decision. Will is that power to decide, to lead, to step out and step forward. It's that decision-making capacity that we all have. It leads, it commands. It's our ability to say yes or no to whatever it is that we're dealing with. Human will is based on human consciousness, which is occasionally fallible. It can result in being willful or being stubborn and obstinate. Spiritual will, on the other hand, is the ability to choose and lead based on divine ideas, truth, principles, and spiritual law. Whereas human will relies on being willful and stubborn and obstinate, spiritual will is founded in willingness. One of the things I want to remind you about will, some of you have actually asked the question, well, what about God's will for me? God's will for you is always, always good. is always the most good that you can receive, that you're open and receptive to. And it will never mislead you. We think that if we surrender to God's will, we're going to lose something. But ultimately, we always gain. We talked last week about starting the new year and tackling our goals and resolutions with the powers of zeal, power and strength, which interestingly are all masculine powers. But actually, the zeal, power, and strength you might apply to getting anything done has to be preceded by the feminine powers of understanding, wisdom, and will. And all of that is preceded by your imagination. We haven't even explored that yet, so stay tuned. But we gather information, we assess it, we figure out how to proceed, and then we make a decision about what direction to go. That's understanding, wisdom, and will, interrelating, connecting, working together to help us move forward. And then, once we make a decision, that's when we engage zeal, power, and strength to actually move forward to where we want to go. So that's a lot of interesting theory, but how do you actually put it into practical application? If you're feeling ill, you might see a doctor. The doctor runs tests and reports the results. This is the power of understanding, the power to gather information, to comprehend pertinent information, to figure out what does that mean. And once you get those test results, once you have that information, once you've chatted with the doctor, you step into the process of wisdom or discernment. That's assessing the information that you've gathered and understanding. And as you've assessed that information, as you make discerning perspectives about what you're being presented with, ultimately you are moved to the choice, the place of decision. What path are you going to follow in that particular instance that will support your healing? That's stepping into will. In any situation, we can rely on our personal, sensory, human input alone, or we can seek higher insight. We can gather whatever information we need to gather, and then we can pray about it. We can meditate on it. We can ask for a higher perspective, for greater understanding and insight. And then we can let go and surrender until we get that sense of knowing. One of my favorite ways to do it when I'm faced with a decision to be made is I do my understanding. I gather the details, I look at the information, I take it in, I think about it, I chew on it, I assess it, I weigh it, I balance it. I'm using understanding and discernment. And then I let it go. And I love to do this at nighttime before I go to bed. Okay, here's a decision that's waiting to be made. I'm not clear on the right answer. I totally release it, and I ask for divine guidance. And it may not necessarily happen the next morning when I wake up, but sure as shooting over the next few days, things present themselves that to me make the decision very clear and very easy so that I can apply will, my choice-making power, to do what is mine to do. Sometimes that divine direction we may get might not seem to make sense from a worldly perspective, but I promise you it will play out powerfully from a spiritual perspective. Think for a minute about Nelson Mandela. He was thrown in prison for 27 years 27 years the man was imprisoned. From a human perspective, we're horrified. We see that as a terrible tragedy. But if we look at how that played out, we realize that for 27 years, Mandela was developing his power and capacity of understanding. He was developing his power and capacity to discern and make wise choices. That 27 years, if we look at it from a higher perspective, from a spiritual perspective, was his incubation period, if you will, to ultimately step out on the world stage or on the stage of his country and be a clear and concise leader, bringing his country to a much higher place. It probably didn't look very good when he was first thrown into prison. And when he languished there for years and years, I'm sure he and probably his family members and many others wrung their hands and said, God, what are you doing? But ultimately, it played out. So even if that spiritual insight you get, that knowing, that intuition doesn't seem to make sense, trust it. I was thinking this week about our lesson, about understanding, wisdom, discernment, and will. And for one brief moment I thought, oh gee, what's a story that would exemplify this? And then I turned on the nose. Now, I don't want to get political here, but I just want you to think about what's been going on in this country over the last month with this whole shutdown business. Think for a moment. What did understanding from a strictly personal human perspective look like? How did that understanding, many believe was quite fallible, how did that understanding play out? How did human discernment and wisdom, if you will, evaluation through comparison and contrast, how did that play out? Was it safe for all? Did it bless all? And how was will demonstrated? Look at the players on that national stage and consider how they played out will based on the decisions that they made. Was it willful? Or was it willing? Now consider this. What would we have experienced in this country had these powers been engaged from a spiritual perspective, an enlightened perspective, a perspective that wanted to bless each and every individual in the whole country? Do you see how these 12 powers are important? This is why Charles Fillmore wrote so extensively about them. He wanted us to learn our own power and how to use it from a spiritually enlightened perspective. In fact, this is our call, this is our challenge. As spiritual beings having a human experience, do we address life and its issues strictly from our human perspective and feelings? Or do we tap into higher understanding, higher wisdom, and surrender to higher will that wants the very best for everyone all the time? We are powerful. We are incredibly powerful. We already have the power of intelligent understanding to deliver enlightenment and insight, to perceive higher truth. We already have the power of wisdom and discernment to appraise, to evaluate, and to discern, informed by spiritual understanding. And we already have the decision-making, choosing power of will, guided by spirit, that moves all of the other powers into action that produces results. The invitation is to know them, to study them, to understand them, meditate on them, contemplate them, and live from them. Use them in balance to transform your daily life and to live from a higher spiritual place. Now that you are masters of the powers of understanding, wisdom, and will, let's know again together our affirmation for today. Claiming my innate power, I recognize and comprehend divine ideas as they flow into my thoughts. Guided by higher wisdom and will, I engage those ideas, and I am a blessing to myself and others. And so, my friends, it is.